of a gene called the reading gene. So this is the ticker tape of a reading gene, let's say. I say, well, what does epigenetics do? Well, I say epigenetics can alter that reading gene by cutting and pasting. So I can cut off part and make the read gene. I can cut off part, make the ding gene. I could cut off parts and make the add gene. And every time I'm doing that, I'm using the same blueprint, but I'm creating a new protein out of it. So what's the point? The issue is simply this. For every gene in your body, using epigenetics, I can create greater than 3,000 different versions of the same protein. Some of those versions are healthy versions, and some of those versions are the equivalent of mutant versions. So, as a matter of fact, you don't have to have a mutant gene. You could have a mutant readout. Epigenetics could take a normal gene and turn it into a gene that reads as a cancer gene. And that's why we're beginning to find out a very important point. Cancer is only about 10% connected to heredity, 90% connected to the environment and your response. And the relevance, as you're quite aware, is simply this. If the signals from the environment are controlling the genetics, then I'm not a victim of my genes. If you wanted to say you were a victim of your environment, you could say that, but that's not true because of a simple reason. You can change the environment. You can change your response to life. You can change all of these. All of a sudden, the concept that you are a victim of your DNA is completely false. You are the master of your DNA. It's your perceptions that send signals to the genes. It's your emotions that send signals to the genes. It's the environment that you live in sends signals to the genes. And all of a sudden you realize, yeah, but I can change my emotions, I can change my perceptions, I can change my environment, and all of a sudden you realize, yeah, you are not restricted to a specific gene readout. You are free to change anything in your life. And this becomes very critical because you have to have self-empowerment. And Evan up here was a great example of self-empowerment. Okay, your body's now screwed up. What are you going to do about it? Self-empowerment. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to control my biology with my wishes, desires, and beliefs. And he did, and that's a great example of changing your life. So I go back and I say, what about that central dogma? DNA goes to RNA, goes to proteins. In all the textbooks, I go, yes, but they left out some pieces that are critical. What'd they leave out? Well, what about the chromosomal proteins, the regulatory proteins? Yeah, they control the reading of the DNA. Oh, you left them out of the story. And I go, yeah, but what controls the regulatory proteins? And the answer is the environmental signals. And all of a sudden, you don't live by the primacy of DNA. You actually are representing the primacy of the environment. And all of a sudden, it becomes very important for you to understand that you change the environmental signals, you change the expression of the protein at the bottom. Okay? So basically, I go back to my tissue culture study and I say, yeah, I put cells in a petri dish, change the environment, and I can change the fate of the cells, changing the culture medium. You say, yeah, but that's cells in a plastic dish, Lipton. What about cells in me? I go, well, here's the interesting fact about you. You see yourself as a single living entity, but the truth is, no, you are actually you're a skin-covered petri dish. You got 50 trillion cells inside your body. How does it work? And the answer is simply this. The cells respond to the culture medium. I go, what's the culture medium in your body? The answer is the blood. So I say, so if you change the chemical composition of the blood, it's the same as changing the culture medium in a plastic dish? I go, absolutely. To a cell, it doesn't make a difference if it's in a skin dish or a plastic dish. It's still going to respond to the environmental signal. I say, so the blood in your body is the culture medium. I go, yeah. And I say, what controls the chemistry of that culture medium? Because if you change the chemistry, you change the fate of the cells. I go, well, you read environmental signals with what? Their nervous system. It's perception. I perceive what's going on in the environment. But that's not the end of it, because the next level of control is more important. It's not just the nervous system response to stimulus response. It involves the mind. And why is the mind relevant? Mind is interpretation. And the significance of this, two people can be in the exact same environment, having the exact same influence of environmental signals, but with two different perceptions of what's going on, they have two different totally responses in their body. So all of a sudden, it's not the environment, it's your perception and your interpretation of the environment, which is the mind's role. And when the mind interprets, what it does, it sends signals back into the brain, and the brain releases chemicals that are matching the interpretation. And those chemicals are sent into the blood, or those chemicals are sent via the nervous system to the cells, and the relevance is at the cells, the signals, just like in a plastic dish, the signals control behavior and gene activity. And all of a sudden you see what's at the top of this whole thing is the mind. I go, well, what chemicals should the mind release? Well, I say, well, I was a cell biologist, but we are all, every one of us, self-biologists. And we are creating our biology. As it shows, the brain is creating the culture medium, the blood, and culture medium is being used to feed the 50 trillion cells in your body. I say, well, what's relevant? I say this, you open your eyes, you see someone you love. Oh, when you see someone you love, what kind of chemicals go into blood? Dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, growth hormone. I say, why are those chemicals relevant? I can tell you a simple fact. If I take those chemicals, add them to my plastic petri dish of cells, the cells grow exuberantly well. I say, isn't that interesting? When people fall in love, they're so healthy they glow. Why is that? And the answer is the chemistry in their body is fulfilling the fullest growth potential of your cells in love. I say, well, what about the same person? They open their eyes, but they don't see someone they love. They see something that scares them. I say, oh, fear, that releases a completely different set of chemicals. When you're experiencing or perceiving, interpreting fear, you release stress hormones and inflammatory agents. I say, why relevant? I say, take the stress hormones, inflammatory agents, add them to the petri dish and plastic petri dish with cells, and guess what? The cells stop growing. And that's why fear kills. It's an effort of the system to conserve energy. So don't grow if you have to run away from the tiger. Stop growing and use that energy for escape. Well, it was only meant in history to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Meaning, okay, you got 20 minutes, scare the hell out of you, and you get away from that tiger, and then guess what? You relax and you go back into growth again. But we don't have that in our world today. We have 24/7, 365 stress. That means every day you read the paper, you watch the TV, you do whatever you're doing. What are you doing? Releasing stress hormones into your body. From your what? Interpretation. Same body, you could look at something and be in love and have a completely different vision. And all of a sudden you realize you were the master, but we have let other people control our interpretations. And as a result, their interpretations control our lives. And we have been disempowered by that. And the interesting